Annette, I hope that today's going to do well in terms of sound quality. I hope we're going to be okay. We're pre-recording this, everybody, just so you know, because we wanted to just make sure we ironed out any issues straight up rather than doing it live. And at the end of the session, I'll sort of direct you to the Source Bottle Facebook page, where if you've got any issues or comments or wanted to add something to the discussion, please, dump it all in there, and we'll definitely follow up with you. So today we're talking. It's Beck Derrington here. So I'm the founder of Source Bottle, and I'm chatting with Annette Densham, who is the founder of Publicity Genie, and she's the publicity genius. We're talking about how to newsjack today's news. So, and that's just a little quick quiz of who we both are. So today we're talking about newsjacking, which is a really kind of well, it's become part of the general vernacular now, don't you think, Annette?
Oh, I think so too, Beck. It's one of my favourite topics because it's such a great opportunity to use what's currently going on and linking your slant, your opinion, your ideas, your perspective to something that the news is already talking about. You don't have to go looking for the topic, it's already there.
Exactly. And that's part of the grunt part of the business is trying to create opportunities out of nothing when the opportunity has presented itself, like you're saying. It makes it infinitely easier. So I'll just, for those of you who aren't as familiar with the term newsjacking and what it really means is, so newsjacking refers to sort of the practice of taking advantage of or kind of leveraging from the popularity of a news story so that you can kind of bolt on or amplify your own relevant sort of story or amplify your expertise, which is obviously one of the things we really want to achieve when it comes to publicity. It became sort of part of the vernacular, as I said, through a book by a guy called David Meerman Scott. So I'm certainly not taking any credit for it. His book was, if you want an interesting read, it's a great book, Newsjacking: How to Inject Your Ideas into a Breaking News Story and Generate Tons of Media Coverage. Just so you can sort of visualize what we're talking about, he came up with this great sort of image, and I know that, Annette, you've done another one, which I might we'll sort of present another time, but this is sort of life of a news story. And so obviously on the vertical axis, you've got interest. On the horizontal axis, you've got time, and sort of looking at when the news breaks. So the news breaks sort of at this point here. This is the sweet spot for newsjacking. So when journalists are really kind of looking for additional information, at that public excitement grows and there's a peak, and then it becomes old news and done. Now this is sort of, in terms of the span of this, in terms of time, this, to me, I don't know if you agree, and it seems to have contracted. So like with many stories, like you might have a very small window in which to newsjack because of our flagging interest, the fact that you're competing with there's so much volume of news out there. So you need to kind of really act quickly. That's one of the main essences of what we're trying to sort of talk about. But part of it is actually recognizing and developing a nose for news. And that's really what we want to sort of look at today, is to try to get those creative juices flowing when it comes to what is potentially a relevant news story to you. And so that's what Annette is a gun at this, let me tell you.
Yeah.
And that's why I really wanted her to be sharing in this kind of conversation today. So, Annette, I think I've done way too much talking. Let's talk about
You've
what's in
done a
today's.
great job. I think
Thank you.
too with newsjacking, it's funny. It's a little bit like Source Bottle and Canva, and I always go, "Oh, I wish I'd done that first." But when you work in PR or when you work in, you, you're always newsjacking. You're always looking for how to get a story multiple sides. What a good journalist is looking for lots of
Yeah.
different angles to a story. They don't just want to present one side. They want to create discussion and create, interest that keeps people reading. However, I totally agree with you. The news cycle's changed a great deal, and in a world where Twitter feeds are considered a news story, um, you, the opportunity sometimes to jump on something is very short, and it always reminds me of the saying, "You snooze, you lose."
Mm. Oh, look, so true. And it also requires, don't you think, not just an interest in your own sort of tiny little sort of circle of specialty. It's having a bit of a broader radar so that you can pick up on relevant and maybe kind of slightly lateral areas or stories that you can hook your own story within and showcase your expertise.
Absolutely. Oh, look, it reminds me of a story, one that I got off Source Bottle. A journalist put a call out about um, women who, I don't know why it was just women, but anyway, women who prepare meals in advance. So they spend, all of Sunday cooking, putting them in the freezer so that, when they get home tired or they're having a bad day, there's already a nice, nutritious meal. And I looked at that and I went, well, I'm working with a nutritionist and she doesn't do that, but she has a pantry stocked for a zombie apocalypse. Like the world could end and you go to her pantry and you could make just about anything from a tin or a bottle or, you know, pasta or whatever. There was so much. So I pitched that idea and said, what about those who operate this way? The journalists loved it, and that was, it hadn't even published yet, but I newsjacked her idea and gave her a different perspective. It doesn't always work, but the
No,
two-page
but
story
it's
that came out in the Herald Sun was
fantastic.
featured my client predominantly over 2 pages because it was something
Mm,
different. Journalists want to do something different. I remember when I was a journalist, so you don't
absolutely.
want to be writing the same stuff all the time.
No, and you also want to set yourself apart. So if you can kind of, from other journalists, you're all hunting in the same news ground. So if you can add a slightly different bent, that's really useful. I mean, because so I always think when I look at a lot of the call outs on Source Bottle, I'll think, oh, I really want to read that story. Like that story sounds great. And I suppose it's a question of saying, okay, this angle could really add a lot of value to that particular news story. This is something they're not contemplating, they're not thinking about, and being very proactive. I mean, Source Bottle is a very reactive tool, and which is fantastic, and you can pick up the leads, but it's really not the only tool in your arsenal. And I think it's important to be looking at newsjacking opportunities. Now, as I said, it is a subtle art of newsjacking. I've seen situations and examples where newsjacking's gone terribly wrong, where it's been, and it usually is it goes wrong when it's overtly self-promotional, when you can see a brand trying to take advantage of a situation, particularly maybe a sensitive situation, and try to
Hmm.
sort of weave their brand into that story in a slightly forced and just unsavory way. So it is a subtle art. I'm reading a book at the moment, The Subtle Art of Not Giving A, and I don't know if anyone else is reading it, but it's not very subtle at all. But this is really a subtle art, and it's something that I think it takes a little bit of confidence, but if you can cleverly weave your magic, it's very, very powerful, just like
That's
it's
so
described in
so
Source
true,
Bottle
Beck.
Gold.
I think I know a few of the brands that you're referring to, and I guess when you're starting to jack, you, you just need to have a go. I mean, it's like anything with PR and marketing. Not everything is going to work, and not everything's going to go over the line. But to get good at something, you've got to do it over and over and over again. And as we're talking, it's subtle, but you've got to be listening, you've got to be watching, and you've got to be reading the news. so you
Yes.
know when to pounce, so
That's
you
so
can
true.
add your 2 cents. And I guess there's I know one of the first things I do every morning is go on to news.com, Google News, and just have a flick around what's happening for the day and just thinking, okay, oh, plastic surgery demand's going up. Why is that? Is there anybody I know who could, offer insight into that story?
Yeah, that's so true. And having those Google alerts, being proactively searching, hunting. Sometimes though, with the news, as you say, like the window's small, so you do have to be very proactive. And I know, so with plastic surgery, say increasing as an example, you think, okay, well, what are the mental health implications of this, and how are young people perceiving this, and which cities, which regional area, like, are there um, strings of this bow that we can tease out a little further, that really helps to add the full story here, because those sorts of grabs are, they make broad generalizations, and sometimes it's about, okay, that's a broad generalization. I can either um, break that stereotype or go with it, and sort of work out how I can weave my magic in. So now we did discuss, we've prepared a couple
We
of
did our
different,
homework.
we did our home we did our homework, and so I know you've got three news stories, or news three that are in the news at the moment that you think could be newsjacked quite well by people, so people with particular expertise. Do you want to talk about International Women's Day?
Go through my list. I actually feel like I did do my homework. I just sat up straighter because it was like, oh my God, I did my homework. I'm so good.
Yeah, so
International
tell.
Women's Day, absolutely. It's a month tomorrow, International Women's Day, so it's March 8th. And,
Right.
it got me thinking. I'm working with a couple of clients who work in the personal development space, who work in the advocacy space, about how we could newsjack the theme of this year's International Women's Day, which is balance. And I mean, there's so much that you could pull out of balance. So the lady that I'm working with, we're talking about balance in the works between, mothers and women who choose not to be mothers. How do workplaces manage the opportunities for women who choose not to have babies, to pursue their interests beyond being a mother?
So you're talking
So
in terms
we
of
pitched that
incentives
story.
or employee benefits, or what do you mean with that?
Incentives, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, like one thing, she wrote a book about it and said, look, we're being paid to have babies, not as much as we were when I had babies, but there's still an incentive there. That's not a good reason to have a baby. Um,
No.
doesn't last very long, that baby bonus. But she was saying that, as a woman who chooses not to have children, where are the opportunities for her to be able to, even have time off when her dog's sick, because
Yeah.
that's her family.
Fur babies.
So we just kind of
Mm.
explored that, pitched it to a journalist who got back to us yesterday and went, we love that. That's awesome. Like,
Mm.
that's such a different angle. Another one was talking about the balance of women in media, not in media, in business. What are the different age groups of women, and in terms of who's starting a business, and why are women at
Yeah.
different ages, particularly over 40, starting new businesses? What's going on there? Why are they feeling compelled to do that? So that's, one's an advocate, one's a personal development coach. So it's just a matter of going, what are the different shadows here, are the different shades of International Women's, because journalists are going to be covering that.
Yeah, yeah. And getting in when you've got more lead time, as you say, you're broadening the sphere in terms of who you can pitch to, because the longer the
Yeah,
lead time,
absolutely.
um, the more publications and things will fall within that time frame. So I mean, like obviously it's too
Absolutely.
for
And
some. Mm, yeah, sorry, you go.
I was going to say, I mean, like that's not newsjacking. I mean, that's preparing in advance, but there will be a lot of stories in the lead up to International Women's Day and around International Women's Day. Now, I don't know what they're going to be just yet because it's a month, but now's the time to start thinking about, you know, what are all of the things that could potentially be talked about so you can be ready to pounce. So when you know it's a day that has some significance, even like Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, end of financial year, all of those type of, you know, big events that, there's every year there's a
Yeah,
load of
annually, yeah.
content published annually, then you can be prepared. It's like the Boy Scout, be prepared. Let's get
Well,
ready to do this. And I think that's a good one to wet your teeth on. Wet your teeth.
yeah.
Your teeth are already wet. They're in your mouth. Cut your teeth on. Um, oh dear, talk about mixing it all up.
Oh well, love a mixed
Uh,
metaphor. But I mean, you're
um,
right. And the other thing though,
cut,
Annette,
yeah, mixed
just saying
metaphor.
that, yeah, you were talking about it's a really good point actually, saying because it's an annual event, you could just try to get in that headspace, look at news from last year, see the sort of angles they explored last year, see the sort of journalists and the people talking about it, and then you know make sure that you slightly you take a different approach, but approach those same people because you know that if they were talking about it last year, that they might be keen to talk about it again. So that kind of just gives you a little bit more confidence to say, okay, these are the sort of stories that were covered last year. So I can be prepared and more confident going in this year, thinking that's probably a story that they'd be interested in covering.
Yeah, absolutely. And it applies to a whole range of experts and specialists that we have using source bottle or who today. So if you're a relationship, you're an expert. If you're in hate, if you're in personal development, if you're a branding specialist, if you're, you create products for women, that there are
Mm,
so many different angles that you could take around the International Women's Day theme of balance. And as you said, I
right.
always find going back and, it's one of the ways that I get to know journalists is I go back and look at what they've done in the past. So
Yeah,
I can be familiar with their style, be familiar with the topics that, get them excited, and
yeah,
be able to pitch so that it's like, oh, these people know me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like, how do they know? I'd be so interested in that. And now, okay, so that's International Women's Day. What about you've got another one, floods and natural disasters. Obviously, it's very
Oh,
topical right now. We're going through some serious. We've got fires down the south of Australia, and then we've got floods in the northern regions, and then also threatening some of the capital cities too.
absolutely. This is really an evergreen story too because every year there is some type of natural disaster in this country. But even internationally, if you've got the desire to spread your expertise and knowledge further afield. So I was thinking, like with in Victoria, there's been a massive storm and thousands of homes are without power. Now, if you're and I'm never sure whether to call people experts or specialists or it gets confusing now.
Yeah,
If you've
just call
got
them
knowledge
experts.
and experience, experts, if you've got knowledge and experience in the realm of emergency services, of crisis management, crisis preparation, um, psychology, then you could be looking at things like how do you prepare and recover from an event like that, regardless of whether that's a storm in Victoria or the floods in Townsville and northern Queensland, or the fires in Tasmania. There's the journalists would be looking at, perhaps what more can we do to add value and depth to this story? You could certainly go in with, your top 5 tips on how to recover from a natural disaster. If you're an educator, there's a whole heap of kids who can't go to school. Their schools have been destroyed or they're cut off from schools. What is the impact on children when they're in the middle of a situation that, and how do they continue to keep learning? How
Yeah, as a
and
parent,
as
what
a
should you be
parent,
doing to? Mm,
that's right. But also as a parent, how do you talk to your child about situations like that? Because life is in chaos and in flux, and in this country, typically, we've got a pretty comfortable life, and not a lot goes wrong in our day to day. So when something like that happens, I think a lot of people are just really underprepared how to
mm.
manage
Well,
that
and
situation
also,
at all.
like
And I think
in
too,
town.
there's a sad story the other.
Sorry, you go, Dan. There's a
There
sad
was a
story.
sad story in Townsville of the 2 guys who were sucked into the storm water
Oh,
drain.
terrible.
You could, newsjack that from the point of view of a psychologist or, someone who works in that mind space about risk taking. You know,
Yeah,
the difference between men and women taking risk, or younger men and older men, and where is that level of acceptable risk? What drives us to go and do something silly like that? I know in Queensland, there's a saying: if it's flooded, forget it. Yet every year you hear stories of people who drive through flooded creeks and get swept away.
yeah,
Some
it's
people get
terrible.
saved, some people don't. So, I haven't seen anything around that risk angle. Why do we do
No,
stupid
that's a
things?
yeah, exactly. It's a really interesting angle. The other thing, of course, is I was watching in Townsville and the floodwaters and the mess left behind. And if you're a health expert, you should be, this is a prime opportunity or prime time for you to start talking about the hazards of what's in that waste, like how in terms of health, what can you be doing to prevent the risk of infection or anything that comes out of um, the mess, what's left behind during a cleanup. Like those sorts of things are really, really important. And people are, because, I'm thinking, okay, a journalist would be interested, but I would be interested in reading about that if it would be directly relevant to me right now.
Yeah, me too. And even from um, like the people angle, there was a story about a family who open their home to I don't know how many people, like lots of people. Like that's a great story.
Oh,
So you
beautiful.
could even
Community.
newsjack
Mm,
that angle from the point of view of community spirit.
love it.
How's that generated especially when we live in a world where we're so disconnected, even though we're the most connected generation ever. Is what makes people like that tick? And you
Yeah.
could do a, like a montage story of incredible people who have gone above and beyond to make other people's lives better. That'd be a nice story to pitch to a magazine, a glossy magazine.
Yeah. Also, even like the community newspapers love those beautiful human interest stories um, very much as well. Okay,
Absolutely. And there's
so
something else I've seen with, just before we go on to the next one, the once in a century big wet event is something that I've seen. Oh, I don't know where that noise is coming from.
yeah, oh, I can't hear it. Don't worry. But yes,
Oh,
I know what you're
something
talking about.
auto played while I was.
Oh, but I know what you mean. Like, so you're saying, they were saying that those kind of the catastrophic floods happen once every 100 years. But now they're saying they happen every 20 years or something. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're
Yeah,
referring
that's
to?
right. Well, I think even too is why is all of a sudden weather an event? Okay,
Mm.
you know, flooding, flooding, fires, storms, they're horrible when they happen. They're horrible when they cause death and destruction. But there's this thing around weather is an event now. You know, from a PR perspective, if you're in PR or a media commentator, to do a bit of analysis of, you know, how we still beat up these type of things
The
to make
language.
them
Yeah.
seem extra special when really, a storm's a storm. They happen, they've always happened, they'll um, continue to happen.
Mm.
Why do we make such a big deal out of weather?
True. Now, your next one's really interesting, and I'm just conscious we've got 5 minutes left. So let's talk about married at first sight, maths lovers everywhere are
Mass.
clamoring to hear. What do you can you newsjack this?
Oh, like my first thing is just turn off the television.
Mm.
uh, Look, I think from particularly a relationship expert is, how do they pick these people? Where do they come from? Why are they doing it?
Yeah,
Um,
what do you
you
think?
know,
What
like
motivates
even
them? It would be so interesting. What motivates these people
it
to get
did, yeah.
involved,
What
particularly if
motivates
they're going
them?
to be demonized?
Absolutely. Or even an analysis of the different types of personality types that end up showing up on these shows. Like, I saw a post today about one of the guys and how narcissistic he is. And just from reading her post, he sounds like he's just treated this woman appallingly. Are they
Mm.
screening these people before they come on the show? Or are they really don't care that, people are being damaged in the wake of our entertainment? Another way I thought we could use Jack, Married at First Sight, or even those type of reality shows, is why are we so interested in other people's lives on TV? There's a plethora of really awesome creative shows that get cancelled every year, yet we're in droves turning on television to watch other people be humiliated. Like,
I know, I
what's
know.
our mindset as viewers? Why are we doing that?
It's macabre. Mm. No, I
I
totally
think you
agree. I
mentioned
think,
something too.
I'm sorry, Dave, you
You're so nice. It's because we can't
go.
see each other.
Yeah.
You brought up something before we were chatting before we started recording about Liam Neeson. I think that'd be a
Oh,
really
yes.
good one to like kind of wrap this up with.
I totally agree. When I was talking about Liam Neeson, I was thinking, if you're in the space where you mentioned Kerry Ann Kennelly, talking about Kevin Hart, people whose reputations are impacted by either a comment they've made in Liam Neeson's particular instance, something found on social media in the past, in the case of Kevin Hart. If you're a brand manager and this is your talent, or if you are a brand manager and you're representing a bank, any of those sorts of organizations, when you're exposed to reputational risk as a result of either social media or or something like a comment made that may alienate an audience or be quite inflammatory, you need to be thinking, these people are interested in, like, oh my God, how do I prepare for something like this, which is often inevitable and very hard to control. And once it goes so quickly. So you've got to be prepared. So, crisis management 101 is, get out in front of the story, etc. So, but if you are in that space, or you're someone who's an expert in this area, these sorts of opportunities are great for you to come out and showcase your expertise and say, this is what they did, this is what they did wrong, this is what they could have done better, or this is what they did right, and just basically highlight what you need to do to prepare for these sorts of inevitable situations. I think um, it's just, and it's something, as I said, that's an evergreen opportunity really, because it happens all the time. And if you can just add different slants, whether it's in the sports, I don't even need to go into the NRL right now. Like if you look at different sports as well, cricket, there's always a crisis of some kind or description. And if you got in front of that and basically said, this is how you prepare for those sorts of things, it would be a great story and people would devour it, I think.
Mm. And even a communication expert is,
Yeah.
like the thing that fascinates me about these stories is, Liam Neeson, Kevin Hart, things that they may have said 10 years ago is like how PC is our world becoming? Like when is it too much? Like when is the point where we can be forgiven for things that we've said in the past? What standards are we holding people to, particularly in the public eye? I mean, after all, they are still things. And I think like the last one to that, Beck, because I know that we've got to wrap up, is from a youth perspective, um, to be able to use this to remind kids, HR consultants, people, employers, small businesses, what they're looking for from their young employees and the impact that social media plays in the hiring process. I mean, I know that's been done before, so you might be looking for, a slightly different angle there. But again, another evergreen topic because kids finish school every year and more, like I just know with my son's friends, I look at some of their posts and think, I don't know whether using the F and the C word in
Mm.
your post is really going to hold you in good stead. So, tips on how kids can prepare to make the best impression
Yeah,
that they
great.
possibly can.
Really great. All right, you're right. We do have to wrap it up. So I've got any questions, drop them on our Facebook page. It's just Source Bottle Facebook page, and I'll see if Annette will also comment on some of those, any posts or any questions you might have. I'll certainly do my best to address anything. And look, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope that we get a chance to do this again and that you got some value from it. Thanks for that. Bye, Annette.
See you, everyone. Bye.